A Christmas Carol. A story Charles Dickens wrote in 1843 about a man learning that there was more to life than money. It was shorter than his other works and written very quickly because of how much he needed money.
Many people today might know the story best from the 1992 adaptation, The Muppet Christmas Carol, starring Michael Caine. While this adaptation and the original both tell the story of a man reevaluating his actions and being nice to people around Christmas, they take subtly different routes to get there, resulting in different messages at the end.
The book is the story of Scrooge learning to be a better person, told through the lens of Christmas and memories of who he was in his youth. The movie, on the other hand, focuses more on Scrooge learning about Christmas and performing kinder actions as a result of learning how people see him.
This might not sound like much of a departure, but it creates a surprisingly different narrative that might leave you questioning a few things. So let's talk about how these stories are different, what stays the same, and what that means.
Before we go any further, we should say that adaptations are always going to fall short of people's hopes from the original. While we'll be comparing the two versions here, it's not our goal to bash either one, but rather acknowledge the differences and their implications.
The opening of the movie is surprisingly true to the book, even keeping in comments from Scrooge about how the needy should die to reduce the surplus population, and showing the pain caused to many by Scrooge's tight-fisted habits and the world of capitalism that they represent.
Both open by telling us how people view Scrooge in a way that makes him seem cartoonishly unpleasant in either version, and sets up clearly identifiable wrongs that need to be remedied by the end of the story for Scrooge to have been redeemed.
Scrooge is shown to brush off multiple opportunities to show his kinder side. He refuses an offer to come to Christmas dinner with his nephew, he becomes combative when asked to donate to charity, and he mildly assaults a caroler.
The kindest act we see from him is him begrudgingly granting Bob Cratchit a paid day off for Christmas, and even that is undercut by him comparing receiving pay for an unworked day to theft, and insisting that Cratchit be in earlier than usual the day after to make up for it.
Now, a popular meme that floats around the internet comments that this story is one of how capitalists need to be scared into being better people. While this is certainly a message we see played out in the real world, it misses some of the nuances of Dickens' original story.
This might be because memes are by their nature reductive, but I'd suggest it might also be a sign of people drawing on the Muppets version rather than the original. The key issue is in how the ghost convinced Scrooge to be a better person, which begins with who that character is shown to have been in his youth.
So to examine this, we have to turn to the scenes led by the spirit of Christmas past. In the first of these scenes, we meet a very young Scrooge. In both versions, Scrooge is brought up short by the sad memories of his younger self and his time as the only child stuck at school for Christmas.
And that's almost where the similarities stop. The book's version of the first half of the scene shows him remembering his love of stories and how their characters were like friends to him, even though this is tinged with a profound sense of loneliness. This combination of feelings helps him find some long-lost empathy and makes him wish he had been kinder to the caroler who had visited him earlier that day.
The movie version is a little less nuanced.
Who cares about stupid old Christmas?
While we can see how the child in either story might not care for Christmas, the book immediately follows the scene up with another Christmas in the same schoolhouse, where Scrooge's sister arrives with the news that his father has had a change of heart and Scrooge can come home to celebrate with his family.
This appears to be a happy memory of Christmas, and demonstrates that Scrooge is someone who has been sad and alone, but has also still felt joy around the holidays and not always hated the season. Additionally, the memory of his sister here leaves him uneasy about how he treated his nephew, who's her son.
The movie, on the other hand, doubles down on his isolation and bitterness. Movie Scrooge is graduating alone and receives some truly bad advice that clearly becomes formative for this version of him.
Remember, don't tip the driver.
This characterization is maintained into the next Christmas that we're shown. When Movie Scrooge has his first job and his boss Fozziwig throws a Christmas party, he's barely in attendance and only arrives to be concerned about the amount of money that's being spent on the party.
The book version of this scene couldn't be more different. Fezziwig announces the end of the workday and that it is time for the Christmas party. Scrooge and his co-worker rush to help set up.
Far from being concerned about the cost, when the ghost of Christmas past questions whether the boss is owed the thanks that the workers are giving him, as he must have only spent a few pounds on this party, Scrooge admonishes the spirit.
It isn't that spirit. He has the power to render us happy or unhappy, to make our service light or burdensome, a pleasure or a toil. The happiness he gives is quite as great as if it cost a fortune.
This obviously leaves Book Scrooge thinking of how he treated Bob Cratchit and wishing he'd been kinder to him. This motif, where memories of the past remind him of someone he was mean to in the opening and causes him to voice a wish to have acted differently, is completely absent from the body of the movie.
This means that by this point in the story, the book and the movie have set up two entirely different versions of Scrooge. In the book, he's a bitter and lonely man who was once a happy young man who could enjoy Christmas. It raises questions about what happened to change him, but it makes it clear that it is not that he is ultimately opposed to Christmas or the sense of kindness to others that is associated with it.
The movie, on the other hand, draws a character who's always been miserly and bitter. The only progression he's made since his youth is to become lonely as well. This dichotomy poses somewhat of a problem as we enter the final scene with Christmas Past, which is one that asks for more emotion from the audience.
The book skates past giving a concrete reason for Scrooge developing his greedy tendencies, but merely implies that it is something he has felt it necessary to do to survive in a cutthroat capitalist world. As we open on the scene of his fiancée breaking off their engagement, the description notes of Scrooge that there was an eager, greedy, restless motion in the eye, which showed the passion that had taken root and where the shadow of the growing tree would fall.
This sentence does a lot of work and sets up the fiancé's comments that his pursuit of nobler aspirations has faded, and his passion for her has been supplanted by a drive to accumulate wealth.
This quickly paints a picture of his change over the past years across the time in their relationship in a way that the movie can't, because there's no indication that Scrooge ever had nobler pursuits. Indeed, it begs the question as to why Belle is surprised by Scrooge's fixation with wealth, when only moments before their first meeting he was loudly complaining about the cost of a party in the middle of that very party.
In the book, this scene represents a major turning point in Scrooge's history, a point where he has become the bitter man that he is today. That very bitterness then drives away his love, leaving him lonely as well.
The movie works to make this a major emotional moment in a different way. It contains the song When Love Is Gone and highlights old Scrooge's remorse for the loss of his love, while setting up a reprise at the end of the film when Scrooge is surrounded by friends and free of the loneliness born of this scene with the song The Love We Found. Or it does if you're not watching one of the versions where they cut the first song for being too emotionally complex for children.
Next, we head into the purview of the spirit of Christmas present. The book has established Scrooge as someone who can enjoy Christmas with past emotional ties to it. The movie acknowledges that this Scrooge has no happiness associated with Christmas at all.
Have you ever noticed that everything seems wonderful at Christmas?
In all honesty, Spirit, no.
And it includes a song where the spirit tells him how great Christmas can be, and that it's about love for your fellow man.
While none of this is more than his nephew really told him at the start of the story, the song seems to get through to Scrooge. But here we see that Scrooge is learning about the wonder of Christmas first, and being kind to people second, whereas in the book, Christmas is merely the lens through which he learns the value of kindness.
The scenes that follow take the established character of Scrooge and show what effects his actions have on the world. There's not as much difference here, but there are two scenes worth noting, one for how it's been altered and the other for how it has been kept the same.
The vision of his nephew's house in the book shows people having a good time together, and Scrooge has so much fun that he gets drawn into the games and doesn't want to leave when the spirit calls him to move on, begging to stay.
When he becomes the butt of the joke, it's softened by his nephew offering a toast to him for providing them a laugh. Scrooge takes this all in stride with good nature, and with the book going so far as to say that
Scrooge had imperceptibly become so gay and light of heart that he would have pledged the unconscious company in return and thanked them in an inaudible speech, if the ghost had given him time. Some part of the memory of his sister, stirred by earlier scenes, reminds him of his fondness for this part of the family.
However, in the movie, this history is absent, and the scene's a very short one. Scrooge is quickly mocked with no other commentary, and he moves on, hurt at being made fun of.
In the book, the scene is a sign of what Scrooge is missing out on by refusing to partake in the holiday spirit. Happiness and joy are shown. In the movie, the scene reads more as the spirit torturing Scrooge with a vision of how people see him.
The other scene here is in the house of the Cratchits. This has remained largely unchanged, except for the addition of Kermit. In both versions, Scrooge is concerned for the health of Tiny Tim, and eager for the spirit to tell him if the child will survive. He's dismayed to hear that the outlook isn't good.
In the book, this concern is supported by his earlier wish to have been nicer to Bob Cratchit, and this is an additional sign of the need to help the poor. The spirit, throwing this surplus population line back at him with regards to Tiny Tim, hammering home the human cost of his actions.
In the movie, without the earlier thoughts of compassion, the fear of Tiny Tim dying stands more alone as motivation for Scrooge's change, and really the first that we've seen. It suggests less of a general change in attitude and more of a wish to save a single person that he has some connection to.
This gets built upon further as we progress into the visions provided by the spirit of Christmas yet to come. The scenes here in the movie play out very closely to those in the book. A couple of elements are cut for time, but some surprisingly dark scenes, including the selling of his still warm bedclothes, remain in both versions.
What has really changed here is the context. In the movie, Scrooge has seen that Christmas can be fun, and presumably has some resolve to do what he can to avert Tiny Tim's death, but a larger change has yet to take place.
The book, however, opens this scene with Scrooge telling the spirit, "As I know your purpose is to do me good, and as I hope to live to be another man from what I was, I am prepared to bear your company and do it with a thankful heart." Scrooge's change has already happened at this point. When he sees that he's not in his usual places, he assumes not that he is already dead, but that he has changed his ways for the better. Any fear in this scene primarily serves as an or else to the earlier lessons.
But for the movie, the fear here becomes the primary motivator, meaning that his final change is driven by a desire not to die unloved, rather than to be a genuinely better person for others.
And this difference of motivation is actually very transparent in the end of both versions. In the book, he sends the turkey to the Cratchits anonymously, delighting in the thought that they won't know who sent it. He donates to charity in large sums and receives nothing in return but the warmth of another. And he takes the time to reconnect with his family, accepting their invitation to Christmas dinner and having a wonderful time.
In between these events, he walks the streets and delights in the enjoyment that others take in the season and the company of their loved ones. The ending addresses each of his earlier transgressions in a way that's about others, rather than about himself.
In the movie, his donation to charity is met with a reward that is outwardly visible. His visit to his nephew's house is brief and is more of a signal that he is being nice than a real connection, and he personally delivers the turkey to the Cratchits, crashing their holiday celebration along with half the city.
Quite aside from the fact that no one would ever thank you for turning up unannounced on Christmas Day with a bunch of uninvited guests and a giant turkey that will take days to cook, all of this is about Scrooge performing Christmas and signaling good deeds.
The book shows a man who reevaluates his life, realizes that he has distanced himself from the world in a way that would make his younger self ashamed, and not done his duty to his fellow man. He makes a genuine change and wishes to improve the lives of everyone.
The movie, on the other hand, shows a man who's terrified of death and that people will think badly of him after he is gone. The change we see is largely for his own sake and to help those directly connected to him. We see in him the earlier stages of discovering and exploring empathy, whereas Book Scrooge is rediscovering the empathy that he lost.
But don't worry, in both versions he pranks and terrifies Bob Cratchit into thinking he's about to lose his entire livelihood before actually giving him a raise.
If you enjoyed this video, you might enjoy our full podcast on the Muppet Christmas Carol and A Christmas Carol, or one of our other videos.
If listening to this has made you want to investigate the original work, you can find the full text on Project Gutenberg. We'll put a link in the notes down below. Thanks for watching the video, and do the YouTube things, like, subscribe, tell your friends, that's the important one.
And enjoy whatever holidays you celebrate.